Morgan Rogers.
This is Rogers, and that's 2-0.
Lacroix.
Higher versions. Lacroix has planted it into the net.
Danny Welbeck.
Got him behind the Kuiper. Welbeck! The icing.
Jordan Henderson.
Suffered a freak arm injury while celebrating England's 3-2 victory over Mexico.
They want him around the place. For what? Well, does he do card tricks?
Chelsea have once again been busy in the transfer market after a disappointing Premier League season that ended with Lincoln Liam dismissed after just 4 months in charge.
Man, age. You're aging men.
Chelsea turned to Xabi Alonso to get the club back on track. In fact, he can be considered a new signing too. Chelsea's recruitment team believed in Redbeard so much that they immediately backed him. The biggest signing of the summer was Morgan Rogers, who arrived from Aston Villa for a British record fee of £117 million. Chelsea also focused on strengthening the defense. That's why they moved for Crystal Palace centre back Lacroix, believing his leadership, athleticism, and experience would add some much needed stability to the back line, since Chelsea kept less clean sheets than Bonnie Blue. On the right, they completed the signing of Italian wingback Marco Palestra from Atalanta. Actually, this guy can play both as a right wingback or left wingback. He's one of Europe's most exciting young wide defenders and fits Alonso's philosophy perfectly. The Blues then moved for a couple of old heads in Danny Welbeck and Jordan Henderson so that this young team finally has some experience and leadership. Now, splurging hundreds of millions of pounds after a disappointing season is not a new phenomenon at Chelsea. It has been a part of the club's DNA for over 2 decades. Whenever the team stumbles on the pitch, the club's typical reaction has been to open the war chest, retool the squad with some elite talent, and immediately start competing for silverware. It's a strategy they have been using since 2003. When Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea in the summer of 2003, he completely changed the way elite football clubs approached building a squad. Instead of making 1 or 2 marquee signings each summer, Abramovich invested heavily from day one. Chelsea spent more than £120 million in a single transfer window, bringing in established stars like Hernan Crespo, Claude Makelele, Damien Duff, Juan Sebastian Veron, and Wayne Bridge. To put into context, Chelsea spent more than half of that just on Mudryk. Isn't inflation great? Thanks to this investment, Chelsea went from fighting for a Champions League place to finishing second in the Premier League. But Abramovich wasn't satisfied. Rather than seeing second place as progress, he saw it as unfinished business. That summer, he made another bold decision by appointing Jose Mourinho following Porto's Champions League win, and once again backed his new manager with a huge transfer budget.
Who do you want for the striker? All the big names in Europe at that time, I told Drogba. And who is he? Where is he playing? Mr. Abramovich, pay and don't speak.
Chelsea added Didier Drogba, Ricardo Carvalho, Ian Robben, Petr Cech, and Paulo Ferreira in one of the greatest transfer windows English football has ever seen. This time, the investment delivered exactly what Abramovich wanted. Chelsea stormed to the 2004-2005 Premier League title, ending the club's 50-year wait to become champions of England. Mourinho's side also produced one of the greatest defensive seasons in league history, conceding just 15 goals in 38 matches before successfully defending the title the following season. It became the blueprint for modern football ownership. If you wanted to compete at the very top, you had to spend aggressively. We saw this again in the summer of 2012. Chelsea had just finished 6th in the Premier League, their lowest league finish in more than a decade. Man, Chelsea used to be so good. Although that season ended with the greatest night in the club's history as they lifted the Champions League in Munich. But of course, the board knew the aging core couldn't continue forever, so they brought in Eden Hazard, Oscar, and Dave. The rebuild paid off almost immediately. Chelsea won the Europa League the following season, and those signings became the foundation of the team that reclaimed the Premier League title in 2014-2015. But a few years later, history repeated itself. After winning the league in 2015, Chelsea completely collapsed during the 2015-2016 season, finishing a shocking 10th in the table. Once again, the club responded with a new manager and another aggressive recruitment drive. Antonio Conte arrived, and Chelsea backed him with the signing of N'Golo Kante, Marcus Alonso, David Luiz, and Michy Batshuayi. Those additions gave Conte exactly what he needed to build his famous 3-4-3 system. Conte became the engine in midfield, David Luiz thrived as the ball-playing center back, and Marcus Alonso turned into one of the league's most dangerous wingbacks. Just don't ever get in a car if this guy is driving. Chelsea went on a 13-game winning streak and stormed to the 2017 Premier League title with 93 points. In the space of just 1 year, they had gone from finishing 10th to becoming champions of England again. It reinforced a pattern that Chelsea fans had already seen multiple times under Roman. When the club hit rock bottom, the answer was to invest more money. Chelsea's next major rebuild came after one of the most unusual periods in the club's history. During the 2019-2020 season, a FIFA transfer ban prevented Chelsea from signing new players, forcing Frank Lampard to rely heavily on academy graduates like Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, and Reece James. Despite the lack of new signings, the young squad exceeded expectations by finishing 4th in the Premier League and qualifying for the Champions League. But there was still a huge gap between Chelsea and Klopp's Liverpool, who comfortably won the league title. Once the transfer ban was lifted in the summer of 2020, Chelsea wasted no time making up for lost time. I mean, these guys were like crackheads itching for their next fix. The club spent more than £220 million on a completely new core. Kai Havertz arrived from Bayer Leverkusen, Timo Werner joined from RB Leipzig, Ben Chilwell came in from Leicester City, Hakim Ziyech arrived from Ajax, Mendy signed from Rennes, and Thiago Silva joined on a free transfer after leaving PSG. It was one of the biggest spending sprees in Europe, but the season itself was actually bumpier than my balls.
What?
Yeah, I should probably get that checked out at the doctor. Chelsea struggled for consistency, and by January, Frank Lampard had been replaced by Thomas Tuchel. But the quality added during that transfer window completely changed the team's ceiling. It was Havertz who scored the only goal of the game as Chelsea defeated Man City to become champions of Europe once again.
The Mount and Havertz is through here. He's round Henderson and he must score. He has scored. Kai Havertz, Champions League hero. Immortality beckons if Chelsea can hold on. 3 minutes before half-time. They've broken the City resistance.
It was yet another reminder that throughout the club's modern history, spending didn't just bring them better players, but it actually brought them titles. Manchester United should take notes. Ever wonder how we upload just 1 or 2 hours after a match? We built PedTalksSports.com to be even faster with 60-second football for quick news. And if you become a premium member of this YouTube channel, you unlock our controversial dark web football articles and access to our premium Discord. PedTalkSports is built to keep you ahead. While Chelsea have always used spending as a way to bounce back after a disappointing season, the strategy they are using now is different than what they were using before. Under Roman Abramovich, they would buy the best players available, put them straight into the starting lineup, and expect them to win trophies immediately. For Abramovich, financial sustainability was never the main priority. Winning was. Chelsea regularly targeted players who were already amongst the best in the world or entering their prime. Look at Michael Ballack, Shevchenko, Cesc Fabregas, Diego Costa, and N'Golo Kante. They all arrived with a proven track record at the highest level. There was very little waiting for players to develop, and if a signing didn't work out or a manager failed to deliver results, well, the club moved on quickly. The Clear Lake era introduced a completely different philosophy. Between the summer of 2022 and 2026, Chelsea spent somewhere between 1.32 billion euros and 1.7 billion euros on more than 40 new signings. But unlike the Abramovich era, this wasn't about filling the team with established superstars. Chelsea focused almost entirely on signing players under the age of 23 and handing them contracts lasting 7, 8, or even 9 years. The idea was that young players have more room to improve, hold their value for longer, and can potentially be sold for a profit in the future. Those long contracts also gave Chelsea an accounting advantage. At the time, transfer fees could be spread across the full length of a player's contract. So if Chelsea signed a player for £100 million on an 8-year deal, only £12.5 million counted against the club's books each season, instead of the full transfer fee. That made it much easier to keep spending while staying within the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. The entire model was built around 3 key ideas. First, lock down the world's best young talent on long-term contracts before their value explodes. Second, develop those players into stars and eventually sell the ones who aren't a part of the long-term plan for significant profits. And finally, use amortization to spread transfer costs over multiple years, giving the club greater financial flexibility while continuing to invest heavily in the squad. It was a very different way of thinking. Under Abramovich, Chelsea spent to win immediately. Under Clear Lake, Chelsea were creating a portfolio of footballers while trying to stay one step ahead of modern financial regulations. The problem with Clear Lake's strategy was that football isn't played on a spreadsheet. There is no title for winning on Excel. Despite spending well over 1.3 billion euros, Chelsea struggled to translate that investment into consistent results on the pitch. One of the biggest issues was the lack of experience. As club legends and senior leaders like Dave, Thiago Silva, and Jorginho all departed, Chelsea lost the players who had guided the team through pressure, setbacks, and trophy-winning moments. The dressing room suddenly became one of the youngest in Europe, and there were very few voices who had already been there and done it. The recruitment strategy also created another problem: squad size. With a constant stream of young signings arriving and dozens of loan players returning every summer, Chelsea's first team group grew to almost 40 players. That made it incredibly difficult for any manager to build chemistry, establish a settled starting 11, or keep every player happy. It's no coincidence that several managers struggled during this period. Thomas Tuchel, Graham Potter, Mauricio Pochettino, and Liam Rossinier all tried to find the right balance, but ultimately failed to deliver the consistency Chelsea expected. I didn't add Maresca because he won 2 titles, and ultimately he was booted because he was interviewing for Man City. For 4 straight seasons, Chelsea failed to seriously challenge for the Premier League title, and even struggled to establish themselves as regular Champions League contenders. The contrast with the Abramovich era couldn't have been much bigger. In trying to prepare for the future, Clear Lake forgot what it takes to win in the present. But the summer of 2026 felt like a turning point. Chelsea were still willing to spend enormous amounts of money, as shown by the British record signing of Morgan Rogers. But this time the recruitment strategy looked different. Instead of filling the squad exclusively with young prospects, the club began searching for balance. On one hand, there was Morgan Rogers, a 23-year-old star viewed as one of the future faces of English football. And on the other were veterans like Danny Welbeck and Jordan Henderson, players who offered leadership, experience, and a winning mentality that Chelsea had been missing for several years. So yes, the club still believes in investing heavily in young players, but it's also beginning to recognize that experience matters if you want to compete for trophies. That approach also fits naturally with how Xabi Alonso wants his team to play. His preferred 3-4-2-1 system relies on structure and intelligent movement as much as individual talent. Morgan Rogers gives Chelsea another powerful ball carrier capable of driving through the midfield and creating space for others. On the opposite side, Cole Palmer remains the team's main creator. Together, they give João Pedro constant service, while forcing defenders to deal with threats coming from both sides of the pitch. The midfield was already strong with Caicedo and Enzo. Like, you can hate Enzo all you want because of the World Cup, but you can't tell me the guy isn't a baller. Lacroix helps fix the back line. Palestra helps the wing-back positions, because he can play on the left or the right. If Xabi Alonso can bring these pieces together, this could be the rebuild that finally delivers on the enormous investment the club has made over the last 4 years. Because usually, when Chelsea spend big, success follows not long after. To see how good of a duo Morgan Rogers and Cole Palmer are, and their history as friends, you have to watch this video right here.